Hello, my name is Mark Dinverno. I'm part of the research group at Monash and Goldsmiths. As well as a researcher, I'm a musician. And what I'm going to start by talking about today is working out what is improvisation. So here at my piano in my home, am I going to play something? And I'm really just going to improvise. We're interested in improvisation in our group. We're interested because we're musicians and artists, and we kind of want to understand what the role of AI is. But before we do that, what's happening in improvisation? What's going on? I mean, there's all kinds of things. So one of the things that I think I'm kind of hyper aware of how it sounds. So I'm listening all of the time to what's happening and almost responding to what I'm doing. It's very hard to talk and do this at the same time. There's an intensity as well, I guess. There's a focus and a flow. I'm very aware of how things are sounding. I'm kind of aware of the unfolding musical journey. And I'm trying to connect in a kind of moment-to-moment way. Really focused, really aware, and almost kind of curious as well about what happens. There is no sense of anything being predetermined at all. Absolutely, my fingers or something is happening because of this focus, this curiosity, having played the piano for years, and it unfolds in a moment by moment way. I'll play something else. I'm trying to do something completely different. You understand it's quite difficult to do it out of a concert environment, but you know, what's happening? Why do people want to hear this? I think people are connected to each other through that intensity, through the moment-to-moment relationship with the music. And if you're in a live venue and someone's playing, really improvising, then it can be really exciting. You know, you can really be taken out of yourself, and you almost are setting up, musical challenges. I just launched into that last piece and didn't really know where it was going and almost how it was going to sound right at the beginning. So that's a sense of improvisation, and we're going to explore in a second what is the role of AI in music improvisation. So having talked about what improvisation is, the next question is, how do musicians improvise together? How do they work together to improvise? And if I'm thinking about what improvisation is, there's a kind of set of constraints there. When I was talking to you earlier, I tried to make it 30 seconds. I tried to make it a sense of what I was doing. I was constrained by the piano, by the acoustics of the room. And then when you're working with musicians, they provide new challenges, new constraints, and new opportunities to feed each other off. And sometimes you can do most extraordinary things by working together. And that moment, a kind of almost a eureka moment when things are unfolding in real time, can be really exciting when you're listening to live improvised music. But there are tricks. There are tricks about why we can do this. One of those tricks is something called the Real Book, which is essentially 500 of the most played songs in jazz. Here's an example. My Favourite Things, most fantastic tune from The Sound of Music. And John Coltrane made this really famous in the 50s and 60s. But it's got a chord sequence. It's in the key of E minor. It has a waltz beat, a 3/4 beat, 1 2 3 2 2 3, and the changes. There's chord changes. And it's all written out in a form with repeats, and it's really clear to the musician. So you've got, and then there's something else. So let me just show you, let me play the tune and let me improvise on the same just for 15 seconds. Here is the tune, and then I will improvise on that same chord sequence. Now I'm going to improvise. Whenever you play something, you always wish you'd done something slightly different, but the great thing about improvisation is when it's played and it's gone, and then you can move on. So I'm using this chord sequence. Now, what's happening, and when I'm playing with other musicians in jazz, is that typically someone is taking the lead. So I was soloing, I was improvising, and that would mean that the other musicians are trying to be responsive. They're trying to react musically in the moment to what I'm doing, and they're not quite sure where they're going. And we've got the drums typically, and the bass, and the whole range of textures and colours and ways of moving the music on moment by moment are available to us. But one thing that's really interesting in music is that you have a level of confidence in what the other musicians are going to do. You kind of know if they're going to break the rules. They're doing it with an understanding of the tradition of music, with the tradition of jazz. And this is the idea of kind of agency in music. So I'm leading, typically if I'm soloing, and the others are responding. And then bit by bit that might change, so that the bass player is soloing and I'm responding. But typically what happens in improvisation is that the humans are, we're trying to exchange our agency and our autonomy, and we're pushing ideas, or we're receiving ideas and making them work. And that's really important when we think about what it is to design artificial intelligence to support human improvisation. So the big question, and what we're here to kind of want to talk to you about, is what is the role of artificial intelligence in improvisation and in the arts more generally as well? And there's basically two schools of thought. One is that we create the machines that can make art or improvise or write a poem on their own. And it's something that in research between Monash and Goldsmiths we called heroic artificial agency. So it's the idea that the machine sits there and is creative on its own. And then there's the other type of artificial intelligence, which we call collaborative AI, where the system is there to try to stimulate, to challenge, and to provoke my human creativity. Now, this is where it gets really interesting. And one of the things that we're really keen to talk about today is why AI should not just be left to computer scientists, or to computer science or AI as a discipline. It needs the arts, it needs an understanding of the humanities, it needs an understanding of social science if we're going to work out where do we want AI as a place in the world. And as a musician, where do I want AI? And part of the problem is this word creativity. And the more that you look at the history, the etymology, the philosophy, the psychology of this word, the more you recognize why people have different ideas about what this word means. To some, in a kind of modern version, creativity is this incredible power in the mind to produce novelty. But a more traditional version of creativity, one which I'm much happier to talk about and I subscribe to, it's a human condition. It's a human condition. It's about being a human being, an embodied human being with our thoughts and our emotions and our experiences and our biology and our sociology, and an understanding of the tradition of humans making music and making work for each other. And here's why it's important. If you think of creativity as in disembodied power in the mind, then of course you can make machines to make, poems or music or art. It makes sense if you use that definition of creativity. But if you use a more embodied, a more experiential view of what creativity is, then the idea of the machine making music seems an anathema to us. Why would I ever want to listen to something made by a machine on its own? Part of the joy of playing music, because I can relate my experience of being a human with other human beings. It connects us. It is the process of a human undertaking music, which is what connects us to the music that it's being performed. So that's really key to us, is that we do not see artificial intelligence as replacing human creativity. We think it makes little sense. What we are interested in, and which we're going to explore next, is the idea of machines which can stimulate, provoke, democratize, excite different kinds of human creativity in musicians like me. Okay, so we've switched to the electric piano, and that's because the electric piano can send out very precise information about the length of notes, about the volume of notes, about the pitch of notes, and even if I'm playing a huge number of notes, actually all of that information is digitally captured, if you like, by the machine. If I'm playing the real piano, which is an acoustic instrument, to get that information is extremely hard, in fact impossible, for some of the things that I sometimes play. So I'm going to improvise again, and now we're going to explore improvising with technology. But I first just want to remind what improvisation is. I'm trying to make something sound good, sound musical, sound intended. I'm kind of curious about what's happening. I'm kind of trying to focus, and I'm still trying to make it sound as good as I possibly can. So I want you to bear that in mind. When I'm working the technology, I'm trying my best to create a musical performance, and let's see how that unfolds now. Hi Matthew, so why don't you say hello and introduce yourself and the system that you built?
Yeah, hello. So my name's Matthew Yi-King, and I'm an AI researcher and a musician. Yeah. And my interest in AI is really how I can use it to enhance the experience of musicians, and how to create AI systems which allow people to explore new spaces of musical possibilities that they might not have explored before. And I've done a lot of work around sound synthesis, so looking at timbral spaces, and in the systems that we're going to see today, we're also looking at note spaces, if you like, or symbolic space of music.
And do you want to say something about the system, Matthew, perhaps some of the settings that are on the system?
Yeah, so the system has a few different modes, right. and we sort of deliberately created these to enable us to sort of demonstrate how
AI could
different
work.
levels of AI can work, right? So yeah, so one of the settings we call parrot, because it simply repeats back whatever you play, right? So that's not really AI. It's totally. I mean. Yeah.
So I get that. So in the first performance that I gave, the system was simply playing back at about a second later what I was doing. But yet, even though I knew it had no autonomy, so we talked, didn't we, before about when you improvise, someone is usually leading and someone's always following. Well, you build a system here that's always following. It doesn't have any decision making. It's completely serving or just repeating.
Yeah, so it has absolutely no autonomy. It just does whatever you do. So that's the first system, and the second system is kind of the opposite, except it has complete autonomy. It does exactly what it wants, but unfortunately, we didn't endow it with any kind of brain or intelligence whatsoever. So it just generates random notes. It's surprising when when a good musician like yourself is kind of faced with this pattern that appears to be random. You're able to kind of like move around in that space, sort of weave it into something that maybe makes sense to an audience.
Yeah, I mean, so I have to say, when I was working with the parrot, it was actually it was surprising to me, even very simple like that, just a little echo machine. You actually can still build performances which you couldn't do on your own, and it takes you to new places. It was sort of challenging me. But it was much more of a challenge when this entirely autonomous system that wasn't listening. In fact, I played with musicians that don't listen and don't know, don't care about the sound of the band. But yeah, for about a minute or 2 minutes, I think I was struggling, but the only way I could do it was to treat your system as a musician. So even though I don't believe that I want to think about the system as being autonomously creative, I was really happy to think about your system as being a musician with me, in that performance.
So you took it on board, and you ultimately tried to create something that people might enjoy, yes, by kind of just dealing with its bizarre note patterns and like trying to weave around them. What about the third system? So the third system is similar in that it has complete autonomy about which notes it plays to some extent, but the energy with which it can play is based on you. So the more notes you play, the more energy it gets, and that allows it to play notes. But it doesn't listen to you apart from counting how many notes you're playing.
Right. So what we started with is the agent that has no autonomy. So this is kind of the parrot, and then we had something which didn't listen and had kind of almost entire autonomy, but you wouldn't call it very musical because it wasn't listening. Yeah. But now you're giving it the simplest kind of listening, so that it's keying on the energy or the number of notes that you said. Yeah. And actually, even that very simple technique, it felt like a little bit more of a collaboration, if you like. So the first one I was entirely leading, so it was just me being played back, so I had total control. Yeah. The second one I had no control, but then the third one you gave me a little bit of control, and I could do a lot more with that. So you could provide some shape, and then so combined with the ability to turn a random pattern into something meaningful by playing correct notes, you could also shape it and get it to stop or speed up or slow down. I mean, what the challenge is, of course, is that whilst we can make it sort of interesting on a talk like this for a minute or two, how on earth would we build an AI that could sustain our attention perhaps for a few more minutes? And I know you've tried to do that with the last version of the system, if you like. Yeah, so the most complicated system is building a statistical model of what you're playing. So it's listening very carefully to what you're playing, and it's building a statistical model of that, which is a way of saying, okay, what kind of patterns of notes does he play? Which note commonly comes after which other note? Or even, and it picks up chords, it knows which chords you're playing, and it can store chord sequences. But it's quite a simple model still, but it is very much based on what you play, but then it can then play that back from that model, similar patterns to the ones you were playing, but
as the piece develops, it learns more and more online in real time about what you're playing, and is able to dig from that whole vocabulary that you've given it over the whole performance. So by the end, it's got quite a rich model of how you play, and it can pull out things which might be quite surprising to you.
Yes.
So in a way, at the beginning, it's a bit parroty, because it only has a little bit of information about what you do, but over time it becomes much richer and can pull out things you did at the beginning, or things that you did in the middle, and so on.
So this is a really strong way to approach building AI systems, is that actually you're kind of recording elements of me, you're capturing elements of my model, my style, and then using kind of AI techniques to play that back. So am I almost playing with an AI version of myself in some sense? Is that what's happening, Matt?
Exactly, yeah.
Right.
So it's a sort of a phantom Mark D'inverno
Right.
that it's building. Yeah.
My name is Alonil Saar. And these are the air sticks.
So, Alon, tell us about the air sticks. What are they and how do they work?
Well, they're just
well, not just, but they are just gaming controllers, virtual reality ones that are off the market, and they allow me to basically play sounds in air, like this. My background is as a drummer, so I don't usually deal with pitch, I deal more with timbre, so I can move my hands in different directions, angles, positions, and get different timbre as well. So what's really interesting about this project is that I'm not controlling any of the pitch when I play with Mark. I'm just going to get a feed of the AI pitch, and then I'll control the timbre moving around, and I won't need to think about striking and being percussive in any way. I kind of feed into that slot in the music where I control the timbre. And one thing that you get from this instrument is that you can actually hold the sounds for as long as you want, which for me as a percussionist is really exciting. You don't have to keep putting energy into the instrument, so you can decide how long each note is. And you can pan it left and right. I don't know if you can hear it in your headphones. You can filter it. Put effects on it. And I find those gestures a bit more like playing brushes on an acoustic drum kit, but in 3 dimensions. And that lends itself really well to working with the AI system, because I can just really focus on moving and
Right, so we're going to try something that we've really never tried before. We only came up with this idea about a week or 2 ago. We haven't really rehearsed this, but what we're going to try now is I'm going to try to improvise with the AI and with one of our colleagues at Monash, with Alon at Monash. We don't really know how this is going to go, but I think before we start, and I wanted to say we don't really know how it's going to go, but we're trying something, you know, really new, really quite different. So, Matthew, exactly what's going to happen now?
Okay, so Mark is going to play the piano, and it's going to generate a load of notes. They get
from your system.
The piano notes feed into the AI.
Yep.
The AI then models what you're playing and then generates something similar, or inspired by you, transmits that to Alon
in
Australia, who then receives that and is able to control what it's sending him with his AirStick hardware. And so he'll be improvising with a sort of phantom version of Mark, which we transmitted from the UK to Australia.
And remember, we've got a bit of a delay of about half a second, 1 second as well, haven't we? But this intermediary helps us sort of play, in some sense, more together than is possible without it.
Yeah, and it's really sort of working around that idea of exploring creative spaces that we may not have been able to get to without the AI. So the AI allows us to sort of free up the time to some extent, and to give Alon something which he can explore, which is inspired by what you're playing. Yes. So it's really a different type of interaction than what we'd be able to do if, let's say, you just sent your piano straight to Alon and he sent his stuff straight back. It just gives us a whole other space to explore.
Great. Well, we're going to see how it goes now. So thank you very much. Wow, fantastic. I like that the best.